ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here on the Father Show, and I'm your host, Mike Thompson. Today, we've got a great show for you, but before we get to that, if you have not subscribed to the Father Show with Mike Thompson YouTube channel, I ask that you go to the channel, subscribe to it, and while you're there, hit that notification bell so that way whenever we have a new show, you'll be notified of it. And if you are a man and you are looking for resources, go to the Father Show with Mike Thompson.com, click on resources, and there you will find state and national resources that can assist you with whatever that you may need. And if you can't find what you're looking for, please give me a shout out. Just send me an email at thefathershow@gmail.com and let me know what you're looking for and what you may need, and we'll do our best to find that for you. All right. So today we're going to be talking with a young man, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. And our subject matter today is how the face of fatherhood is changing. And I really want to get into that because it is changing, and I want us to discuss it and understand why it's changing in today's society. And we all know evolution, everything is going to change. Nothing really stays the same. Fatherhood is part of that. It's not going to stay the same. It's hopefully getting better. And that's what this show is about, is trying to make us men the best version of ourselves. So today we have Shannon Carpenter, and he is the author of The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad, as well as the co-host of Dad House Pod. He is a nationally known contributor on the fatherhood, parenting, at-home parenting, and has been appeared on programs including Good Morning America and the What Fresh Hell podcast. He has appeared in New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, as well as authoring several columns on CNN on topics such as the importance of paternity leave. He is a popular weekly columnist for the Good Man Project and a premier contributor to many parenting organizations such as City Dads Group. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's welcome Shannon Carpenter to the show. Shannon, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here, man.
It is my pleasure. I'm really glad that you decided to come on the show and really talk about, how the face of fatherhood is changing. And you're a prime example of it, because in my day, in my grandfather's days, you rarely heard of a stay-at-home dad. Now you're hearing a lot more of that over and more every day. And it's great. It's nothing wrong. I think it's fantastic. So how did you get to be a stay-at-home dad?
So the funny thing with it is, you said it right at the start. Everything is changing, right? And I actually read a study. I wrote an article on a study a couple weeks ago, about how men today are expecting to do 50% of the parenting duties, and they want to do that because they want that bond with their kids. Now, currently, there's about 2 million stay-at-home dads in the U.S. that consider themselves the primary caregivers, and I'm just but one. I happen to be exceptionally handsome and funny, so that helps. But the way I started, I started 14 years ago now. And the way I started was our second child was on the way. I had a 15-month-old daughter, and our second child was on the way. And I noticed that every day I'd get up, I'd go to work, I'd pick up my daughter, we'd eat dinner and go to bed. And that's all I did, right, for like a year. And I realized that my wife and I, my family, got into what I thought was a rut. This is not what I wanted. So my wife and I sat down before the birth of our second son, and I told her, I said, I think someone needs to stay home. This is not what I want. And we looked at it, and then I kind of said, as a joke, I said, it should be me. Now, my wife works in advertising, and she had a higher career track. I was working for the state of Texas as an abuse investigator, and she did have a higher career
Mhm.
track. And so when I looked at it, not only the finances of it, but personality wise, my personality is suited to this. I'm very comfortable with myself. And I think you
Mhm.
have to be as a stay at home parent. You have to be very assertive at times too. And I said it as a joke until it wasn't a joke anymore. And I thought about it, I was like, oh, it should be me. And I told my wife that. I said, I should stay home with the kids. And that is actually the conversation that happened. She got promoted in a job and moved to Kansas City to get ready for to move there. And I was in Dallas. And so in 30 days, that was my first stint, was 30 days alone. And
Mhm.
so I sold the house, had a newborn, took care of my 15-month-old daughter all by myself for 30 days. And I would not wish that on anyone. That was the hardest thing I think I've ever done.
Now, were you in the delivery room when the kids were born?
I was with I have three kids now. I have Vivi's now 16. I have 16, 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I was present all three births.
Hmm.
And I was up at the head and they were all C-section. When they say,
Okay.
don't look over the curtain, they
Hmm.
mean it. That is rough, man. But I did every single one because I wanted to be the first one to see him come out in the world. That was a very, very big deal to me. That's my kid. That's no one else's. And I was very proud of that moment.
Yeah, I can believe that. And you cut the umbilical cord.
Yep.
I know when my first child was born, I was like the Lion King. I held her up because my dad died when I was young. So
Hmm.
he didn't get to be there. So I held the baby up and showed him, that she was here. And that was a moment for me that I never forget.
I know it's profound, isn't it? Like you don't know until you know is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
But that one single moment changes your entire world. And I knew it. The first time my daughter came out, I was like, things are never going to be the same. And that's
Yeah.
okay. I wanted that.
Yeah.
You're terrified and scared and excited all rolled into one.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the way it was for me.
And I didn't realize until that moment that I had never really grieved for my father. I did,
Hmm.
but my dad always told me, okay, when I'm not here, you the man of the house, so you have to take care, your mom and your sister, I'm the baby of the family. But when I held her up, just tears just flowed because that's
Yeah.
when I really missed him the most.
I think that is a very good way to say it, and it kind of goes into something that has been on my mind a lot. This idea of fatherhood mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
and we look to our own fathers for that, and a lot of guys don't have it, and that's tough. My dad had MS, and
Mm.
so he wasn't as involved until he passed away right when my last son was born. But that mentorship means a lot. You're right.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's that moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you, in a different way, I actually took my daughter to work with me every day. And so I had
Hmm.
her strapped on right here on my chest. And I really would never change that. I love having her. So I can
Yeah,
understand how you felt.
the same way, and the thing on the chest, I call that my dad's saddle because that's what
Mm-hmm.
it is, right? It's your
Mm-hmm.
saddle that your kids ride into. And I've always heard it said that you'll never regret spending a moment with your kid. You know, um, you'll forget jobs, you'll forget tasks, but you won't forget those moments you spend with your kids. And I agree. No matter how you do it, whether you're a stay-at-home dad or not, the numbers keep showing that dads want to spend time with our kids, and we need help doing that. We need help figuring out how to do that without shame, without condescension, and that's what I hope my book does anyway.
And you brought up the fact that I know you wrote a column about paternity leave. Was that for
Hmm.
men?
It was that specific column appeared on CNN, and it was talking about paternity leave, but it kind of goes into a bigger topic of paid leave in general.
Okay.
And it's a topic that I am passionate about because I think with men, paternity leave is not accessible as much as it should
Mm-hmm.
be. Like the percentages are low, and it's even low the numbers of people that take it. And the ones that do get paternity leave typically get maybe 2 weeks. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, if you're working an hourly job or factory job that doesn't have benefits, you don't get that money. You don't get leave, and so you have to make a choice. whether I'm going to welcome my child into the world or am I going to feed my family. It really is that simple
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that we shouldn't force fathers to make, or mothers. It's again, this idea of paid leave needs to be a thing. There's a organization called Family Values at Work that advocates with Congress and the state governments to do this very same thing. And I would like to see fathers take paternity leave, because that moment, those first couple months are essential and important. You're
Mm-hmm.
not just there to sit down. And any father who's had kids who've been through, those first months knows that there's work to be done.
Yeah.
There's supporting mom and helping her, breastfeed, and she's not going to be mobile, and you got to change diapers. But more than all of that, you have to bond with your family. And that
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah.
And that's
And I
why I
think
advocate
that's
for
so
paternity
important.
leave.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, how do you think we can change the mindset of men, and not even the government yet, but how we can even get
Yeah.
the men to change their mindset to see the benefit and the joy of staying at home? Because a lot of fathers, you mentioned changing diapers.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things, they're like, I'm not changing no diaper. Or they're scared to, or they don't know how to, or they just think it's, nasty.
Yeah, because the truth of it is, you and I've done it. Changing diapers is not hard. It is not
Mm,
rocket science. If you can change a tire, you can change a diaper. You don't want to change a diaper. That's the truth of it, right? Call it what it is,
yeah.
because it's not pleasant. But the experienced fathers around you, like you, Mike, will tell you that is the least gross thing you're going to do as a dad. There's going to be way worse stuff that you're going to have to get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
So suck it up, Buttercup. I think with men, I really do think with men, honest to God, I think it starts with how we talk about fatherhood,
Hmm.
that we allow them that space to recognize that they can be caregivers, and they are, and that their role in a child's life is important. We are not there to just provide money, right? We're there to provide guidance. We are there
Hmm.
to provide support, hugs, love, the whole deal. And how we talk about fatherhood matters a lot in changing that mindset. And that's the
Yeah.
difficult thing. Now, the generation coming up, the studies show that mindset is changing, that fathers are expecting to be just as involved as a mother.
Hmm.
And that's a good thing. The next thing we have to do is, when we talk about fatherhood, we cannot be condescending to those men, right?
Right.
The truth of it is, we didn't grow up with any expectation of how to care for our child or anyone else,
Right.
right? We were based on competition and roughhousing and fighting and all those kinds of things. And we were never shown how to breast or how to bottle feed, or
Yeah.
how to change a diaper, or how to just interact with a child. Those were not things that we were shown, right? And so
Hmm.
the articles you typically see towards fatherhood in men that talk about those things can be very condescending. They are a repurposed article for mom who's complaining about dad, and they're saying, "Oh, just do it." But that's not how you reach dads. Um, Dads don't want to be lectured to. We want the advice that it actually works. And I think that is one of the big changes that we're seeing right now. And I hope my book hopefully includes that we're giving them the advice that is not talking down to them, and that we're encouraging them to do these things. The advice I give to new stay-at-home dads, and just all dads, I tell them to own it. You're not helping mom. You're there to parent.
Hmm.
Take control. Jump in there with both feet. You'll figure it out. You know, you'll
Yeah,
get there.
because
Um, yeah,
yeah, it is scary, and that's understandable if you've never experienced it or never really been around kids. Say a niece or a nephew or something like that. It is a little
yeah,
scary, but it's
yes,
it's it's doable. You can do it. You just like you said.
yes.
You just have to want to.
Yeah, you just have to want to, and understand that it doesn't make you any less masculine to do it.
Hmm.
I mean, hugs have no gender, man. I hug
Hmm.
my kids every day. That's a big part of it. I don't have to be tough all the time around my kids. Sometimes they don't need that. Sometimes they need me to be understanding.
Hmm.
And it's not a shot at your manhood. And when I speak in public, or I do YouTube videos or write articles, there's always someone that pops in there and says, "Oh, he's wearing a dress," and I just welcome the comments, because it's just the furthest thing from the truth. I've been tougher as a stay-at-home dad than I ever had to be before I was a father,
Hmm.
and that should speak for itself.
Yeah, because it's not, you're not wearing a dress, you're not,
Mm-mm.
you know, and grant you, sometimes people womanize it. They're saying all the
Yes.
women is supposed to do this and the man's supposed to do
Yes.
that. But and that's the thing that I enjoy seeing changing in this fatherhood issue, because I like seeing fathers being more involved with the kids.
Yes.
And it is very important. And really, with the kids that we are seeing going on today in this world, with all the school shootings and,
Yes.
the kids in gangs or things of that, the study shows that a lot of times it's a lack of having a father in their lives. And even if they are in their lives, they're not giving out the hugs, as you mentioned. They're not giving out the praise. They're more putting a thumb on them, or you're not good enough.
Yes.
You man up. Don't do this. Don't do
Yeah.
that. But let me ask you something too,
Uh-huh.
because it is something that I always wonder about. Isn't
Hmm.
it also important, the woman's mindset of what a man is? That's important as well.
You bring up a very good point that very, very few people bring up. It's actually called maternal gatekeeping. It's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is what a real man is, right? This real man idea. And it's a ridiculous thought because no one gets to decide my masculinity other than me. It's
Right.
just that simple. And they say I would never let my husband stay home, or I would never let my husband change diapers and take care of the kids. First off, no one's letting me do anything. This is my life. This is my child. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not asking for permission. Like, seriously, none of us are, right? I don't need anyone's permission to actually get in there and do these things. But you also hinder any kind of bond building and involved fatherhood if you take that approach. And I've had women call me out before, saying things like, "Oh, I expect my man to work. I'd never let him be you." And I'm like, I'm not asking anybody's permission. And again, that kind of gatekeeping does nothing but harm the family. And you're right, studies have shown over and over and again that involved fathers, you get more confident kids that are better with conflict resolution, kids that can actually do better critical thinking. Like, these studies have been proven this with an
Mm-hmm.
involved fatherhood. So instead of trying to tear that down or create that barrier between it, you need to open it up and accept it. And that's what I think this next generation, I hope, is doing. And
Yeah.
hopefully the guys like me and you who've been through some of this can guide the way and give some mentorship on the way.
Yeah, because a lot of women and men, they're going off what they've seen or learned
Hmm.
from their father, or a lack of no father. And
Yes.
that's what they're judging you and me, or any man that wants to stay home or be involved with their
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it doesn't just have to be stay at home. It's just involved.
Yeah.
Like, I know dads at the park can be rare, but sometimes when you're a dad at the park, no one talks to you. Everyone avoids you. You're seen as a predator sometimes, and those things have to stop. I'm just a dad trying to spend some time with my kids, and that's it.
And I was a single dad for 11 years. I didn't,
Okay.
if it happened, people shunned me because I was a single dad, or
Yeah.
why you have them. I didn't even know, because I didn't pay any attention. I was
No.
like what you were saying. I'm not asking you for permission. This is my life, and I'm going to do what I want to do. So those outside influences, they weren't there for me.
Yeah, and if you ignore them, that's the best way to go. And I always get the question from moms, how do I get my husband to do more around the house
Hmm.
or be more involved with the kids? And I
Hmm.
always tell them, I say leave. It's like, just leave. Take off a day, go do whatever you want to do for an entire day and just leave the kid there with them. They'll figure it out and you'll get it really, really quick. And that's
Yeah.
actually a good thing. The uninterrupted time is essential.
And we, you mentioned something in, when you sent your information in, and you were saying
Hmm.
how hard it is to deal with mental health being a father.
Hmm.
How hard is that, and why is that?
So, and it's not just stay-at-home dads. I'm lucky enough where I get to talk about this and I get to write articles about this. But it's not just stay-at-home dads, it's all fathers. We grow up again with this mentality of John Wayne or whoever you have,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That we suffer in silence, and that to say that we may have mental health issues or anxiety or depression makes us less of a man. And that does nothing more than hurt us. Because then you self-medicate, you turn to alcohol or drugs, or you're surly, or you're not in present as much as you should be or could be. And so we have these mental blocks and this stigma attached to our own mental health. And what I would like to see and what I encourage is to understand that, as a man, you're still a person, and
Right.
you have to deal with the mental issues as well as the physical issues. They're both equally as important, because without you, the rest of it falls apart. And I really tell that to a lot of the new dads is you're the bedrock the family is built on. So take
Mm-hmm.
care of it, and that means getting mental health checkups. And if you deal with some anxiety, it's okay. I do, especially during the pandemic. The last 2 or 3 years have been really, really hard on parents.
Really?
And it's okay to go talk to somebody.
So, what was it hard for you? How was it hard for you for this pandemic?
So I am an extrovert by nature. Like, I thrive in crowds and on people, and I lost all that. And
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, I had 3 kids that were all virtual school at home. And that meant basically I was the teacher. So in one moment, I remember this very specifically. I was teaching my daughter um, the short story "The Raven" by Edgar Allan Poe. We were discussing that, and then 10 minutes later, I was going over quadratic equations in math with my 14-year-old son. And then I finished up my day by making cardboard flip flops with my elementary school student, and that was my entire day. And it was over and over and over again. And there were times I just felt so inadequate, and I didn't have the people around me and the community support that I usually have that lifts my spirits and gets me energized.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if I'm a stay-at-home dad and I do this all the time, man, I know other dads and other parents were just having a hard, hard time.
Yeah.
And I tried to reach out to them as much as I could, but that isolation, I think, in fatherhood is not good. And I think the last pandemic, I think that showed that, you know.
Yeah. And did your wife, does she look at you any differently or treat you any differently, or does she really appreciate what you do? And say like the roles were reversed in a
Yeah,
sense.
that's a really great question. It's never asked before. So if I've gotten that question. So does she see me differently? I think, we're more empathetic to the other's point of view, first off. And I think that's actually important. With our first child, she was on maternity leave for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what it was like to be the sole breadwinner. And she knew what it was like at home. And that's when she decided she hated it. So I think we have more empathy toward each other's roles. I think from the start, she's always been my biggest cheerleader. I mean, she
Mm-hmm.
loves this because she knows that she doesn't have to worry about the kids and what happens at home. That I've got it. A kid getting sick is no big deal in this house because I just take care of it. She doesn't have to take off work, and I don't have to take off work. If she has a last minute business trip, which has happened a lot over the last 14 years,
Mm-hmm.
she can just go. I'll pack her suitcase, get her out of the house, and me and the kids will do our thing. And I think there's more appreciation for that on her side. And for me, I will always appreciate the time that she has given me with the kids, that she made that possible. And I think she deserves huge credit for that, for supporting our family, but giving me a chance to build a relationship with all 3 of my kids that
Mm-hmm.
I actually do have. It's pretty great. And I think during the pandemic, I leaned on that relationship a lot to talk about some of these bigger issues in the world, the school shootings, the systemic racism, and now the war in Ukraine. That relationship has been there for us to have an open dialogue, and I think that's priceless.
Yeah. I, I told another guest that I had on the show that he was a stay-at-home dad, and I told him my wife had
Mhm.
asked me, at my former wife, I should say, asked me to be a
Uh-huh.
stay-at-home dad, and I'm like, no, 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 and it really wasn't about the kids because I picked them up, I took them to school,
Yeah.
I fed them, I did all that, so I didn't have a problem with that. It was just a mindset of staying home and my wife making all the money
Yeah.
and me not. That's
Hmm.
was really my biggest issue.
Well, I think it's most men's biggest issue because you're raised from day one to be the provider, right?
Hmm.
Like that's ingrained in you as much as competition is. And it's constantly hit over the head that that's what we need to be. And then I learned in that first year of being a stay-at-home dad, because I had the trouble transitioning in my own head, I learned that my worth was not tied to a paycheck,
Hmm.
you know? And it's a hard thing to really come to terms with and learn.
Yeah.
It's hard to be reliant on someone else for your well-being financially. And I know that's something that moms have dealt with obviously for generations, and now dads are
Hmm.
getting some of the view of that. And so it's a hard thing to come to terms with and accept it and then encourage it, you know.
Yeah.
But I always tell new dads, I say you have to be open with all your fears and everything from the very beginning, man, or it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Do you think is you have to be comfortable in your own masculinity to be able to make that transition?
Absolutely, you do. And even if you are, like, I've always been confident to the point of cockiness sometimes, and that's the
Hmm.
truth, right? But even for someone like me, I had a hard time letting go of who I was and becoming who I wanted to be,
Hmm.
based on my own preconceived notions of what a man does. I grew up in the South with a very Southern father and a very Southern way of life. And it was hard to let go of what my masculinity, what I thought it meant,
Hmm.
until I looked at my kids and knew that they were my reason. They were my masculinity. If I do right by them, I don't care about the rest. And it comes to that point where you just have to accept that.
Because I agree, and I know the provider piece of it is something
Hmm.
that makes it hard for a lot of men, and like I mentioned earlier, women too, because they
It
have that
does.
mindset that you're supposed to be the provider, not me. And
Yeah,
but in today's society alone, a lot of women make more than the father, even if he does work out of the home.
he does. And I think that's a very good point to make and something that you have to realize now that women are embracing their role in their careers
Hmm.
and they're going to out earn a lot of men. And that's great. Um, one of the proudest moments is seeing my own wife reach her full potential. And
Hmm.
I get to cheer that on. I went to a speech that she gave the other day only because I've never seen her give a speech because all my kids were too young. And I was so excited to be in the crowd and see her do her thing and just be her supporter. It was really a pretty great thing to see.
Yeah. Now you have a book, and I
Hmm.
love the book, and I'm gonna really try to get it myself. But the ultimate stay-at-home dad, and I'm way past that. My youngest child is 24, so I don't plan on staying at home anytime soon. For retirement, maybe, but
Hmm.
raising kids, no, that's over. But
You've done your time. That's what we say. You've
I
done your
did my
time.
time, and I really enjoyed all of that. Like I said, being a single dad, uh, and I honestly, for me, I always wanted kids. I didn't really want to get married, but it was how you were
Hmm.
brought up that was like,
Hmm.
you get somebody pregnant, you got to get married and raise a
Yep.
family, and it was like, no, just give me the kids. I can care less, you know and I was always comfortable, like you, always comfortable in my
Yeah.
masculinity, didn't care. I took my daughter to work with me for her first year and a half of her life. She went to work with me every day. And
That's actually great.
wouldn't change it. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved spending that time with her. But your
You
book,
know,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was just going to go into the book. The book was written for dads. You don't have to be a stay-at-home dad to get something out of it, you
Hmm.
know. It just tells you how to be with your kids. It is that simple. And I hope even guys like you that have been through this can look at the stories and laugh and remember what you went through with your kids, because they'll probably relate a lot to you. Kids are messy and dirty and can be just they can break you in a minute and make you in the next. It's actually pretty amazing. So the book is designed just to get your feet underneath you and tell you how to do certain things with kids, from cooking and cleaning to finding your support system, which I think is lacking in the dad world. I'd love to see more of that. To dealing with your mental health, what side hustles work, which ones don't, and how to go back to work if you are a stay-at-home dad. So the book was written for that reason, and it's written in very practical advice. You won't find empty platitudes like suck it up or walk it off. You won't find those things in this
Okay.
book because I don't believe in those. I believe in practical advice that makes a difference in dad's life. And I deliver all this advice through humor, and that's the vehicle that I use because I think dads respond well to humor. They
Hmm.
don't deal in the sentimental moments that much, but they love a good joke. They love a good dad joke. They love a good story. And so that's how the book delivers its information. So it's not only just my advice in there, but I interviewed 57 other at-home dads, and they
Oh,
gave their best one-line hack, one-line tip. So by the time you end up reading it, you should be pretty competent. You should know what to do on any situation.
really? So it'll cover from
hmm
birth on?
I focus more on birth to toddlers on this one,
Okay.
because teenagers they're a whole nother deal, as you know. Shout out to my daughter who wrecked my tire the other week.
Eeh.
Um, but I think book two will kind of develop more into that because I think with teenagers there are bigger and harder conversations to have.
Yeah.
With toddlers and babies, it's pretty straightforward. The battles that you're dealing with are more emotional and inside your own head, and I think those are the difficult ones that the book really covers well. You're doing the physical tasks, you're taking them places, you're getting comfortable taking them places, you're getting your own gear, and I think that's where the young children live at. I think once you can do that, then we can move on to the teenage years, which is a
Yeah.
whole nother ball of twine there.
Now, what advice would you give a new father with
hmm
going into the toddler years? What advice? What do you think are like two main things that they should think about?
You know, I actually get this question from time to time, and I give a piece of advice that I tell fathers, because I think it's one of the things we have a problem with in general that I've seen. So our own anger and frustration comes out, and it's natural for it to come out, right? Because kids never do what you ask them to do. The 2-year-old is going to get mouthy or not do what he want to do. It's 2-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn to keep yourself even, and that's okay. Never get too high, never get too low. But instead, if you feel yourself rising a little bit, you put yourself in timeout the same way you would be a toddler. There's nothing wrong with it. It is okay. And just realize that it's not a fight between you and your child, right? It's communication. And a 2-year-old just is terrible at it. That's just what it is, you know? And they'll come around to your way of thinking. But that's the first piece of advice I give to dads is if you find yourself frustrated or the anger's coming, take a timeout. It's okay. We've all been there. You're not going to be perfect all the time, and you shouldn't expect to be.
Right.
The second piece of advice I tell dads with toddlers is you have got to build your community. You have got to get out there and find friends or other fathers that can understand what you're going through. And then what ends up happening is you share the load of parenting, and now it doesn't become so dire. And I've been lucky enough to be with the same dads group for 14 years. We have 5 of us. We've raised 16 kids together. I mean, we're a
Wow.
big group when we go out. Yeah, we go out every summer. And so that community has made the difference. And whether you're a stay-at-home dad or not, you go to places like citydadsgroups.com, they run
Mm-hmm.
dad groups or show you how to do it, and they support those groups, or athomedad.org, they support you. And no one cares if you're a stay-at-home dad or not. No, that's the secret of that home dad world.
Okay. Okay.
Everyone is dad. We don't care. We'll
Okay.
help. So build your community. It is important. It's more important than you think it is.
I agree, and a lot of things that I know men don't do is go out and talk or
Yeah.
seek that help in having a conversation with somebody. And I
hmm
really would like more men to change that. You know, we
Yeah.
really need to get out there and I guess you could say open up, be more vulnerable.
It is, and it's hard to be vulnerable because as a man, you're used to walling it off because you have
Mm-hmm.
to, and man, I do that. Like we all do it. The vulnerable writing I do wrecks me for days, right? When I drop the jokes aside,
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. But there's a program, there's an organization called Movember, and you've probably heard of it. But I interviewed them recently about this very issue is how do we open up? How do we have these conversations? And their advice was to have the conversations where men are at, at the bars where you're watching a football game. And don't just have the surface level conversation, really talk. And it doesn't have to be one big conversation. It just has to be many small micro exposures of conversations.
Hmm.
And so I learned that from Movember that supports men's mental health and physical health. And I thought it was great advice. And I give that wherever I can now.
Yeah. Well, good. I really love what you're doing, and I love the
Thank
book
you.
because a lot of times, and I have a friend of mine, his brother was having their first child, and he was just panicking.
Yeah.
He had no clue what to do, how to do it. He was
Yeah.
scared half to death. And it is scary because I know
Yeah.
when I was getting ready to first have my daughter, the thought of, okay, I got to pay for college, I got to pay for this, I got to do this.
Yes.
And, it was like, whew, how am I going to do all this? But, you put a foot in or you just jump in and you just do it, you know.
You just figure it out. And I went over this in the book. So, like your own gear, what do you pack in a diaper bag? Do you even call it a
Hmm.
diaper bag? Like, seriously, that's a question.
Hmm.
And when you get a stroller, for example, always get one with an adjustable height handle because you're going to be taller than your wife and that's going to hurt your back. So, the book has advice like that. So, that new dad who's thinking, what do I do? I'm telling you right now, chapter 1 and 2 are built just for you.
Ah, that's great because I
Whether,
really
yeah,
never even thought about that. And it's been a long time since I need a stroller, but with my
yeah.
grandkids, I never saw them having adjustable handles on there.
No, and they have them now. And even you who gets closer to the grandfather years, right? A soft-sided cooler for picnics,
Hmm.
right? That is a huge win that you can use as a dad to actually save money and spend time with a kid. And there you go. And so again, this gets back to the idea of dad mentorship. Those of us like me and you have been through it that can help those guys that are just
Yeah.
starting, and make it a little bit easier and take some of that fear away. Because yeah, it's like, oh God. I mean, they come out and you're like, that's what changes. You're like, I'm responsible for everything now, and I'm barely an adult. And that's the way it feels like, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Now, do you think, when you think about that you are now looking at all the responsibility that you have, do you think that was one reason, like our fathers and our grandfathers just pushed that aside, said, okay, I got to go out and work. You take care of the kids. I'm just going to bring home the bacon and you do the rest. I'm good. I got enough on my plate. I got enough on my shoulders.
I think so. That was probably a lot of it, and it was tradition based.
Mm-hmm.
The wife stayed home and dad went to work. But I will say this. I think, as hands off a lot of our fathers were, I realized in my own journey here that my own dad was a stay-at-home dad for 5 years. When he got MS, he couldn't work anymore. And so my
Mm-hmm.
high school years, he was home with me every day. And every day he made it a point to talk to me
Hmm.
and, find out what's going on in my life. And he was actually my role model or trying my role model for what I try to do now. And out of all the men in my life, I've never met anybody tougher than my father and my grandfather. War
Mm-hmm.
vets, my grandfather was in the Navy. They've seen some things and they were always my biggest supporters. As traditional as they were, the moment I told them that I was going to be an at home dad, both of them were like, you'll never regret it. That's what they really said.
Yeah.
And they were excited for me.
Wow. That's important. And that's
It is. I had support.
yeah, that's really important. And because my dad was one that, he wasn't around a lot, but he always spent time with me and my sister. Always.
Yeah.
Whenever he was home, he spent time with us. And it's something, like you said, you'll never forget, you'll never
No.
regret. And it was, you know, and I know a lot of things that I do is because of what he did for
Hmm.
us. And so I would, look at the kids. We had relatives in this weekend, and they were talking, they have little ones, and they were talking about, oh man, I have to watch this movie over and over and over again. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you do.
you do. And that's just part of it. But enjoy it while you have it, because like you mentioned, when they started being in their teenage years, you're going to be begging, say, okay, what you doing?
Yeah.
Dad, I'm good. I'll see you later, Dad.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's why now, even now, I make intentional moments that I get to spend with my kids, that we have hobbies together. So I get that they're not as quantifiable as much as the other ones when they were
hmm
younger,
hmm
but those are my moments, right? And I do things with one of my kids that it's just me and their thing, so I can recreate that moments. And I got that from a guy named Mitch up in New York. He's a dad whose kids have grown up, and he said, the best advice he could give is that when you're with your kids, be present.
yeah,
And
right.
it really,
Key.
I've heard it before, but the way he said it was like, oh, now I understand that. Be engaged with who they are as a person. And so for me, that means I tell a lot of jokes and make them kind of bashful and, um, embarrass them in public. Like my daughter was driving my minivan not too long ago, and someone from school saw her driving a minivan. She said, Dad, it's like, I cannot show my face again. I was like, well, my job here is done. I've done good.
Now, I was going to ask you, what was one thing that you really got from your father? And I know you mentioned something a little
Mhm.
earlier about, him supporting you. But what else can you tell
Yeah.
me that you learned from your dad and you really appreciate it?
Oh, yeah. Patience and focusing on the big picture. And this was the truth of my dad. And I actually had this talk with my son yesterday, that my dad could let a lot of things go if the bigger picture was still intact. All
Hmm.
right. He could let little small mistakes go without riding me on it and just having a talk with me saying, all right, fix this or fix that, knowing if I had the rest of life handled out what he wanted. And the example I'll give about my son, because I try to do the same thing with my kids.
hmm
My dad, when I was 18 years old, I got a tattoo, a very small tattoo. It was my moment of rebellion. And I was about to go to college, and I finally showed my parents. I said, I got a tattoo. My mom just erupted. She went nuts. And my dad looked at me and said, you going to college? I said, yes, sir. He says, I don't care. And that was it. Right? He didn't care. So with my own son is a straight A student, right? And he put so much pressure on himself, and he overslept the bus the other day. No big deal. And he got really upset at himself. And I'm like, your grades are straight A's. And he's like, yeah. I was like, you don't have to be perfect. I'll drive you to school. Like, this is fine, right? Keep the big picture in place, practice that patience. And that's what my dad did for me, that I really appreciated the way he did that. I do.
Yeah, that's a heck of a lesson learned, too, especially for your son.
It was.
Yeah.
It is. And it took me a while to really let that sink in. But once I saw it the way my father saw it, I was like, that old man was crafty. He was pretty good.
Well, I hope more men hear this and learn from it and learn how to be a little bit more patient. And
Mhm.
like you mentioned earlier in the show, when you're getting angry, back off, put your own self in timeout and
Yes.
look at the big picture. Look at the whole
Yeah.
picture, not just that one little piece.
Yep. Don't lose yourself in it. I
Yeah.
mean, you're still your dad, and you're a man. You're both things at the same time.
Yeah.
So put yourself first sometimes. It's okay.
Well, Shannon, unfortunately, that's going to be our time for today. But I
Hmm.
want you to tell the audience how they can get in touch with you and some of the groups that you're involved with, how they can get in touch with that. And we're going
Sure.
to talk about that a little bit after the show. But I want you to tell the audience how they can find that
Okay.
information.
Well, again, I believe in the community with fatherhood. So you can find our podcast, Dad House Pod. And that's me and four other stay-at-home dads that give dad advice on what you're going through, and we've all been through it. So that's number one. You can follow me on all the social medias, Hossman at Home on Twitter, Shannon Carpenter on Facebook. Um, you can find me on my website, on shannoncarpenterauthor.com, and that's where you can find some of my best of material, or you can read my weekly column in the Good Men Project. Just search for Shannon Carpenter, I'll pop up. Finally, if you want a copy of the book, it's sold wherever books are sold, from Amazon to everything else. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Flagship Books. I'm doing some things with them, and they're a great local independent bookstore, and I love supporting them. So definitely, if you want a book, go search for Flagship Books and go buy your copy.
Okay, that's great. And because I love what you do. When do you think you're going to have the volume 2 come out?
I'll give you an exclusive. How's that? I'll give you an exclusive. I've got the proposal written for volume 2.
Okay.
And that is basically, I have the idea behind it. So it's a work in progress. And so I don't know when it will come out or what's going to happen with it. But it's going to be the same brand of what you get in this book: humor and real advice. This next book probably is going to be closer to teenage school years, when we got to really have some of those very tremendously hard conversations with our kids. And that's what because as a dad, this, we don't back away from the hard. Just because the hard conversation is hard doesn't mean we don't have it. So
Right.
hopefully this book will help dads have those conversations we need to do.
Well, good, good. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and maybe I'll pass it on to some of my
Thank you.
kids, so they are having.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you joining us here. I know you got a busy man, and I have really appreciated and learned some things, and that's what I like doing. I love learning and hearing different ideas and different ways of doing things. And I thank you for sharing what you have experienced and your life experiences.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm the same way. The greatest joy of writing the book was listening to all the dads, and I forgot that I was supposed to be writing because I would just talk to them.
Yeah.
But it's the same way. Thank you for coming on. Let me come on, and thank you for doing the show, because this is the kind of things that dads need to change that face of fatherhood.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping this. Hopefully, you and I and some other men, we can all make some changes, and we can have better fathers and better men that are walking around this earth and bring some love into this world, because this stuff is getting ridiculous.
You know what? That's a great way to end it. I got nothing to add. That's fantastic. Let's bring more love in the world. That's exactly what we need to do, man.
All right. Well, Shannon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on the Father Show this week. And I really want to thank Shannon Carpenter for coming on the show and providing his experience and about his book. Stay at home dad is, it's something that you're seeing a lot more of. And it's a great thing, because your kids are the one that's going to benefit from it. And, as a father, you probably benefit from it too. And women, you as mothers, you're going to benefit from it as well. So it's a family thing. But like I always say on this show, a family, when you become married, you are an entity, and it's for you and your family. So you got to do what's best for the two of you and your family, not anybody else. Not your mom, not your dad, not your sisters, not your brothers, not your aunts, not your uncles, and anybody else. It is between the two of you, and I hope that you guys make the best decision for yourselves and your family as you're going through it. So next week we'll have another show, but if you have not subscribed to the show, go to the Father Show with Mike Thompson on our YouTube channel, hit that subscription button, and while you're there, hit that notification bell, and that way you'll always know when we have a new show. And don't forget, if you are looking for resources, go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com, click on resources, and there are statewide resources and national resources, programs that are there. And we're going to definitely try to get Shannon's group to list what they have and what they offer on our website as well, so that you can always find them. So until next week, I ask that you just have a fantastic week, and God bless you all. And I look forward to seeing you next week.